You're listening to the UnSafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
We have been shown by the King of the universe that even though we see all the evil around us, and we get a little anxious about it, he's still in control. He's in control of all of it. Those things that the world believes are important, such as what they have, where they live, what their lifestyle choices are, aren't that important at all. God's on the throne. There is no other. Jesus Christ is returning for his own sooner than any of us can even imagine.
Have you ever had one of those days when you're left alone with thoughts of your past life? Maybe you lived shackled by old habits or felt stuck with no one to turn to. If that's you today, Pastor Ken wants you to know that you are not alone. Jesus Christ came into this world, died for your sins, and promises to be with you always. Through every storm and season of hardship, Jesus Christ remains faithful and will carry you through every struggle. Trust in Jesus Christ. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Hebrews, chapter 10, as he continues his message, Subversive Prophecy.
Have you noticed that we like to watch stories about those who took stuff from others and then had a fall? Doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. We just like watching crooked politicians go to jail. It's just fun to watch. They get away with it for a while, and then it's always the same story. They go down in flames. It's because we're made in the image of God. And he's pointing this out to Habakkuk. This is what's going to happen to the nation that was used to be a judge on Judah. Well, it's going to happen to all those who also insist on living for self. God's just. We reflect that, and we want to see justice as well, because we want to reflect God's justice. We want to see the wrong made right. You've made your family rich with the things you took from other people by force. You've built luxurious and secure homes, and God's going to punish you. That's the basic thing that's going to happen here. You condemned that house and took all the good stuff for yourself, and we know it. By their own actions, they've ensured that they will indeed reap what they have sown, and even the house complains and turns against them. Babylon's a type of the world. It's a type of the city of the world. And that's the next point of discussion, verses 12 to 14. The city. We're moving from individual to groups of folks in leadership positions to now we're talking about the city. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and finds a town with violence. Is it not indeed from the Lord of armies that peoples labor merely for fire and nations become weary for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. The problem, though, this was not just individual homes. This is how the whole city of Babylon grew. Injustice and murder was governmentally sanctioned in Babylon, just as it is in many nations today. In fact, in most of the West. We have progressed from individuals to families to cities, and this is a message for all, not just Babylon. There are those today who say, I would not do these actions. I would not build a city on the blood of others. Now, in Habakkuk 12, verse 12 here, the word for bloodshed is damim. The word is translated bloodshed. It is plural of the noun blood, and in the Hebrew it always means murder. That's what it always means. So when you see that, they've killed somebody who didn't deserve it. They've murdered someone. That's what it means. Now, do we have a problem with that in the world today? Yeah, we do. The problem, many cities and governments in the world today have no problem with that. Stop and think about the cities around the world and the states around the world and the nations around the world that have endorsed abortion or physician-assisted suicide and are now building themselves up on bloodshed. And you wonder how long that will go on before the Lord takes action. A city is supposed to be like Jerusalem, if Jerusalem is doing what they're supposed to be doing, a community which performs all of its functions to the glory of God. Jerusalem, when it's obedient, is a classic example of that, how a city should be built. Babylon is a type of the city of the world, and it's built on murder. It's built on bloodshed. God condemns the city built on bloodshed, on the murder of innocents, and he considers it to be founded on violence. In verse 13, God states that those who build in that manner are building it to be judged. When he says labor merely for fire, the intent is to bring into the eye and the memory of the reader, oh, they're building it just to be like Sodom and Gomorrah, just to be burned. By referencing also the God of the heavenly armies, all of a sudden he's saying this is a military matter. This is a matter of judgment. It's going to involve God and his armies. What he's saying is the kingdom of the world, which is hostile to the Lord and to his glory, is going to be destroyed. When we examine the book of Revelation, we discover that all those cities, which are the cities of man, Babylon and all the others in the nations of the world, cities built on bloodshed, murder, and violence, they're all destroyed. God's reminding the nations of the futility of building on a false foundation. This is just, as a statement of fact, it's just merely an observation that all the efforts of humankind, at the end of the day, come to nothing unless it's being built on the Lord. And it's a forecast of what's going to happen to all the nations. And we see this in Revelation 16. Starting in verse 18, there were noises and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake. Such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth. Now the great city, that's Jerusalem, was divided into 3 parts. And the cities of the nations fell. Not just a few of them, the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Then every island fled away and the mountains weren't found. But did you pick up on the fact that every city is destroyed? This is right at the end of the tribulation. When the nations and the cities are judged, as we see in the book of Revelation, well, there's a new state that gets established globally. And that future state is when Messiah returns to planet Earth and the judgment of the city of man has been accomplished, and it is prophesied in verse 14 what that new state will be. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, and its waters will cover the sea. The earth is then full of God's knowledge, and peace is everywhere because, well, that's the standard under the Lord. In Habakkuk, on the other hand, this knowledge is only secured through the overthrow of the kingdom of this world, and consequently only then will the earth be filled with it, and not with the knowledge of Jehovah, but with the knowledge of his glory. Why is it the knowledge of his glory? Because when he comes, he's coming as the God of heavenly armies, and all the armies come with him, and they see all of God's glory in judgment showing up as he overthrows the entire planet. Those cities which sought to glorify themselves on the backs and lives of others, like Babylon, won't succeed in doing so. They're working hard, but their efforts are futile, as the end for that city is destruction. So you can look at the nice, beautiful towers of some of these towns and the structures and the beautiful construction that's there, and understand some of the crime that's going on in it. But at some point in time, the Lord's going to just flatten all of it. That government, which thinks to glorify itself by its own achievements, by establishing a city or putting up public buildings or instituting new laws or providing services, but does so by forced or unjust measures, making its subjects labor for that which cannot last, well, it's going to be burned up by the fire of God's wrath. And of course, we don't see anybody doing that today, right? All evil kingdoms will be judged by God, all of them. So now we come to verse 15, different subject. Woe to him. So we've talked about how the world's going to be when God returns. Now he's talking about sinful practices again. Woe to him who makes his neighbor drink. To you who mix in your venom, even to make your neighbors drunk so as to look at their genitalia. You will be filled with disgrace rather than honor. Drink you yourself and expose your own foreskin. The cup is the Lord's right hand, will come around to you, and utter disgrace will come upon your glory. For the violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and the devastation of its animals by which you terrified them, because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town, and all its inhabitants. So now the Lord moves to another set of crimes that take place in all the nations. It's the crime of human trafficking and the abuse connected with that. Now, in Babylon, it was just a common practice. It was a common practice in the Middle East. You fought a war against somebody, anybody you took as a prisoner, you stripped them, you took them home. You put some of them in as slaves, you abused others, and maybe you'd release them, maybe not. But the goal was they took prisoners, they'd strip them and humiliate them, making sure that they understood that they're now your property and you defeated them in a war. Now, it's not only limited to this point in time, by the way. This has been practiced by virtually every combatant force over the centuries, to include virtually every nation in the world today and every indigenous tribal group. They've all practiced this. This is a sin problem that comes up from Genesis 3. It once again deals with the issue of control. But it appears, though, that the Babylonians, who we know had drinking problems, added to the atrocities they already normally committed by forcing their victims to get drunk before subjecting them to physical abuse. Most likely, Babylon did as many other nations did and still do. They used rape as a weapon of war and as a means of humiliation. And of course, that's still being used around the world in various armies today. ISIS is the first one that comes to mind that was a recent practicer of that. Earlier, we talked about their need to control others. And when you add in the sexual abuse, the intoxication, and the slavery, it just adds more evidence onto the charges. Today, as we look at what's going on around the world, we also add prostitution and pornography to the mix of human trafficking crimes. By the way, this is all crime and items that the city of man is accused of in the book of Revelation, chapter 18. Their indulgence in looking and at and disgracing others will now be turned around. Now they're the ones who are going to be doing the drinking and then be exposed, showing the people of Israel that they're not covenant members. They're not just, they're not believers, and they're not Jewish. And it's going to be exposed for everyone to know. They would be the ones humiliated in defeat. Instead of parading around their prisoners, they're the ones who are going to be paraded around, stripped, and abused. Those who are not the just would find themselves disgraced. And the Lord graphically points that out so that there's no mistaking who the Gentiles are as a result of the disgraces they will suffer at the hands of their captors. Disgrace will fall upon their glory. And just look at how Babylon fell. Persia attacked them while they were drunk. In fact, the Persians were upon them unawares. Herodotus tells us this. And by reason of the large size of Babylon, many of those in the outer parts were overcome. They were taken at that immediate point. But a lot of people in the middle of town didn't know they had been captured for a couple of days because they were too blitzed. They were having a party. They were dancing and making merry. And then they learned about it a couple of days later when all of a sudden they realized, oh, they're all prisoners now. The defeat of Babylon was swift. It took several days because most people were too busy drinking. It also appears that the Babylonians acted indiscriminately when they attacked surrounding nations. And God holds them accountable for these crimes too. Crimes against the environment. You stop and think about that. Really? Yeah, God talks about that. Specific mention is referenced as to what happened in Lebanon. Now, Lebanon was more than just a place that Babylon passed through going to Jerusalem. It wasn't a speed bump. They actually spent a lot of time there when they attacked the city of Tyre and tried to conquer Tyre. And when they were unsuccessful, they went to Egypt, conquered Egypt, and came back through Lebanon. This is referenced in Ezekiel 26 as well as in Ezekiel 29. Now, while in Lebanon, they saw, look at all the raw material here, all these trees. which could be used back home in Babylon. They had a lot of building projects. Remember, they're building stuff that they steal from others. So what did they do? Well, we need lumber. So they clear-cut the forests that existed in Lebanon, cut down all the trees, and sent the lumber home. And you deforest an area, it changes the ecology of the area. It removes the habitat for various forms of wildlife, and those are listed by the Lord as some of the crimes that they committed, as well as the bloodshed that was conducted in Lebanon as well. When Babylon came, they brought murder and violence with them, and they exploited the land. And when they left, there was not a lot left there. It'll be no different with the Babylon of the beast during the tribulation. Verse 18. What benefit is a carved image when its maker has carved it? Or a cast metal image, a teacher of falsehood? Its maker trusts in his own handiwork when he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a piece of wood, awake, and to a mute stone, arise. That's your teacher? Behold, it's overlaid with gold and silver, yet there's no breath at all in it. But the Lord is in his holy temple, and let all the earth be silent before him. Now, again, Babylon worshiped Marduk. He had been a big deal in Babylon for centuries. I mean, all the way back to the days of Hammurabi, and I mean, he'd been their main god. So Habakkuk is relating Yahweh's truth about him is pretty subversive. I mean, you're telling folks who are going to conquer you that your gods are false because they're nothing more than fallen angels and demons. But it was not a new thing. It went all the way back to the Tower of Babel, actually. If you take a look at it, it goes to the city of Eridu and the Tower of Babel. That was Marduk again. Marduk's main sanctuary was located in the center of Babylon and was a group of buildings, most notably a low temple, which was called Isagilia, and the temple tower, which is a ziggurat, Itimenanki. And between these two complexes was a processional street. This is where they'd have their festival every year. It contained major shrines of Marduk and of Marduk's wife, Sarpanitu, and there were a bunch of other chapels, including one to Sen, the moon god. Now, annually, this festival took place called the Akitu Festival, except for the last 10 years prior to the fall of Babylon. And that was all about Marduk, and it took place at his supposed temple. Principal upon the ritual events that would be mentioned are prayers for Babylon. They would divest the current king and reinvest the king every year before Marduk. They would bring in all the gods of the various cities to Babylon. And on two separate occasions in the Shrine of Destinies in the sanctuary there, they would make sure that Marduk was held higher than all the other gods. There's much more involved in this mythology of this false god. All the other gods were subservient to this one. So when Babylon conquered a city, they took all their gods and brought them back to serve Marduk. That's why they brought everything back from the temple. That's why they did that to every god. When the Persians took over, they started sending those gods home because they knew that you want to build an empire, you want people to support you, let them have what they want. But this is what Babylon did. They would bring the god to Babylon to serve Marduk. Now, Belshazzar's activity on the night he was killed was part of this. And of course, there was already bad blood because of what his dad had been trying to do. So, yeah, he was in the middle of the night worshiping the moon god, and that's when they worshiped him. And that's when they would have their Akitu festival for him. Now, Nabonidus was fanatically devoted to Sen at the expense of Marduk, and he boycotted the Akitu festival and favored the one for Sen. So the Belshazzar's feast in Daniel 5 is one of those feasts where they're worshiping the moon god. The drink was part of the reason for the downfall of Babylon, and they were worshiping a false god at the same time. So they're getting drunk, worshiping a false god, engaging in all the activity connected with that false god, and the Lord's calling it all out here in what Habakkuk's saying. What benefit is a carved image? Indeed, it cost Babylon everything. The condemnation of idolatry is something that the remnant, the just, would again be standing and cheering over. Gods failed. The gods failed them. The Lord is successful. He always is. To tie together the ultimate downfall of Babylon involving idolatry and drunkenness as the ultimate reason is what the Lord's all about. That's what he's showing here. And those who read this would immediately recall Psalm 115 and the contrast between believers of the Lord versus the nations and their idolatry. As it says in Psalm 115, starting in verse 4, their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. Eyes they have, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Noses they have, but they do not smell. They have hands, but they do not handle. Feet they have, but they do not walk. Nor do they mutter through their throat. Those who make them are like them. So is everyone who trusts in them. And that's what happened in Babylon. They had become just like their false gods, worthless drunks. The attempt to call an idol to awake or speak, when they say that, immediately those who are part of the remnant, those who are the just, would remember, oh yeah, Elijah had a little problem with the prophets of Baal, and he made some comments to them at lunchtime about the fact that they still were trying to get their God to wake up and bring fire down from heaven. And it didn't happen for them, by the way. To expect guidance or teaching from a lifeless object, even if it looks pretty, is impossible. It won't happen. I mean, in this area, we actually have a couple of Hindu temples. And they look really pretty, and they've got really pretty gods, and they offer all kinds of fruits and vegetables to them. And I haven't yet seen one of them get up and walk off. They're still there. The actions of a foreign power are in the end driven by a deeper religious conviction. And what he's saying is these no gods are worshipped as gods by Babylon, but they're still no gods. And what is truth? Well, verse 20 tells us what the truth really is. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. It's true reality, and it's ignored by the people of Babylon, by people who are serving themselves and are not the just. Yahweh is in his holy temple. He's on the throne. He's in charge. Unlike Marduk, Yahweh has not been replaced by sin. He's still God. Unlike the gods who are paraded before Marduk annually at the Keto festival, God parades before no one. All the earth is to be silent before him. The judgment has been announced out of the mouths of the oppressed nations, and now we're just awaiting its execution. And that's what we're waiting for even today. We, like Habakkuk, find ourselves looking at our culture, and we wonder out loud as we look at it, along with Habakkuk, how long? We have been shown by the King of the universe that even though we see all the evil around us, and yeah, we get a little anxious about it, he's still in control. He's in control of all of it. Those things that the world believes are important, such as what they have, where they live, what their lifestyle choices are, aren't that important at all. God's on the throne. There is no other. Jesus Christ is returning for his own sooner than any of us can even imagine. Or as it says in Psalm 11, verses 4-7, the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes see and his eyelids test the children of man. The Lord tests the righteous, but his soul hates the wicked and the one who loves violence. Let him rain coals on the wicked. Fire and sulfur and a scorching wind shall be the portion of their cup. For the Lord is righteous, and he loves righteous deeds. The upright shall behold his face.
Thanks for joining us for today's edition of the UnSafe Bible. Pastor Ken Brown is teaching from Calvary Chapel, Martin County in Hobe Sound, Florida. Today's message is part of a series Pastor Ken is teaching on the book of Habakkuk, which is a book many of us can relate to today. The prophet Habakkuk is praying for the Lord to tear down the nation of Babylon as they continue to oppress and enslave the Jewish people. But the way God responds is interesting. He reminds us that he is the one still in control. He sees how the nations of Babylon's time, and even the nations of our modern time, have devolved into the worship of greed and cruelty. But just as kingdoms rise and fall, God will use those nations' idols against them, and the most evil empires of men will meet their own demise. It may seem like God is allowing sin to rule unopposed, but there will come a time when He will strike down the evildoer, as well as those who failed to take a stand for what is right and just. We hope that this message is reassuring to you of God's will and way. If you'd like to get connected with us here at the UnSafe Bible, you can visit us online at theunsafebible.com. Once you're there, go to the Connect tab and click on the Connect Card button so that we can get to know you. There's also an archive of past messages from Pastor Ken that you can access by clicking on the Media tab. Also, if you're near Hope Sound, we'd love to invite you to join us for an in-person service here at Calvary Chapel, Martin County. We'll be back next time for another edition of the UnSafe Bible.